Alrighty, I'm here to talk about some more Jump to Lightspeed spoilers. This set continues to impress me. I'm really excited to get brewing with this. Probably will start in the next couple weeks once we get about half the set. I'll be putting a lot of early brews up on my Patreon, so if you're interested, go check it out there. And before we get going, please hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. It helps out a ton. But yeah, so what I'm going to do, cover the two new leaders that we got. I'm going to cover all the legendary cards and other highlights, and then I'll jump over to SWDB to cover the rest of the cards. But when I say the rest of the cards, there's still a lot of really good stuff there. I just always want to showcase a few first before I jump into the major bulk of the spoilers. All right, so the first new leader is Admiral Holdo, green hero, 6 cost leader deploy. So at 6 costs, we know I'm already a little tentative, but here we go. With the front side, you have an action that costs 1. It says give a resistance unit or a unit with a resistance upgrade on it, +2/+2 for this phase. So there's not a ton of resistance units yet. We're expecting to get more. There's going to be some more in this spoiler. There are a decent amount of resistance upgrades because the pilots, a lot of the pilots are resistance as well. So this ability is powerful. +2/+2 is a lot. I'm a little hesitant on this one because I do not love leader abilities, generally speaking, that cost 1 to activate. This is a very slow ability, right? Because it doesn't immediately attack with the unit. It just gives it the buff. So it's kind of like a two-parter, right? You need to use the ability. Cost resources means you're playing off curve for the turn, and then you need to get the attack off. So, I'm not super high on it yet. She flips into a 3/8 for 6 with resistance official tags, and the on attack is the same as the leader ability. It says give another resistance unit or a unit with resistance upgrade on it, +2/+2. So can't target herself with this. The ability is obviously a little better when it's free. I mean, it's much better when it's free. The stats, 8 health at 6 deploy is chunky. It's a pretty interesting breakpoint in this game. A lot of things can somehow get through 7, but 8, like we know Cad Bane has been pretty durable as an 8 health leader at 6. Very difficult for him to get one shot. I expect that to be the case here too, although 3 power, not huge. The whole package here of the buffing, it's going to depend a lot on how much resistance upgrades and resistance units we end up getting, but even with a decent amount, I still think this ability is pretty slow, pretty clunky. It's a tribal leader that appears to be a little aggressive, but it's a 6 deploy, which of course generally can't be aggressive. So overall, I am not super high on this one, but we'll wait to see if more resistance cards change my mind. And the other leader, one that I am a little higher on, is Captain Phasma. This is an aggression villainy leader with an action. If you played a first order card this phase, deal 1 damage to a base. So it's free. It doesn't cost resources. It does cost an action. This is a little bit like Sabine, right? You're dealing 1 damage. Obviously, you don't deal it to yourself. It costs an action, so you won't usually do it if you're going to give up initiative to do it, right? Most players that play Sabine, they won't ping unless the opponent has already claimed, in which case they kind of get a free ping. I expect that to be the case here too. Doesn't look like it'll likely be too hard to trigger if you're playing a first order tribal aggro deck. We're going to see a few new first order cards that came out in this preview. We also have a couple that existed already, like Kylo's Tie, and from an earlier preview from Jump to Lightspeed, Admiral Pride, I believe, the 2/3 that does something with indirect damage, blowing up upgrades, and if you have initiative, it deals indirect damage. So cool card there. There's not enough yet. I looked through all the first order cards already. It's not enough yet, but I expect there will be. I hope there will be, because this is a pretty cool ability. And let's talk about the unit. So this is a 5 deploy, very important. It's a 4/6, so sturdy stats. I prefer 3/7, but 4/6 is decent, right? Bosk is a 4/6. It's not a terrible stat line. And it's a first order trooper, and says on attack, if you played another first order card this phase, you may deal 1 damage to a unit if you do deal 1 damage to a base. So now you get to add that ping, shoot something. You have to shoot something if you're going to deal 1 to a base. So if their opponent doesn't have any units and you want to deal this damage, you will have to hurt one of your own, but I don't think that's a big deal. Of course, it's going to be good to play the first order unit. early in the turn before you flip, most likely. Get that flip off, get your first activation off. It's a very powerful ability to deal 1 to base and deal 1 to a unit for free. If you're able to do this a second time or even a third time, it's going to really add up. This looks like it's built to be a pretty aggressive villain leader, and there aren't very many of them. Red hasn't, like, outside of Kylo, hasn't really typically been a very aggressive color. In fact, the red units, especially early drops in this game, haven't been super powerful, but we're seeing some new First Order cards that might change our minds, and it'd be pretty cool to be able to build around another aggressive red villain leader that isn't so all in on like a Kylo massive flip turn by like putting a lightsaber and like playing a bunch of really cheap low cost units just to like flood the board. This will be a different style of red aggro deck, probably more similar to Sabine, that is more like paced, right? Not flooding like units at a time. We might even get to do something with ECL in a deck like this and create like big swings. If we're playing green, of course, Overwhelming Barrage might come into that. So I think there's a lot you can do with Phasma. The stats do support an Overwhelming Barrage. They do support a lot, right? 4/6 is good, 5 deploy. We're already happy about this stuff because most good leaders cost 4 and 5. It's just what's been happening so far. It's very difficult to make waves if you are not costed that way. All right, let's take a look at some highlight cards. So we've got another rare base. This is Thermal Oscillator. It's a 27 health base, and it says your minimum deck size is decreased by 5 cards. So we're going to get a little bit of a spiel now about deck size and like how many cards you should put in a deck. The answer is always 50 because math mostly. The less cards in your deck, the more likely you are to draw the cards that you need in your deck, right? So the more you go over 50, the less likely you are to draw the better cards, right? There's always a 51st worst card in your deck. There's always a 50. If you go higher than that, there's a 52nd worst card, 53rd worst card. So it's clear that the developers have identified that the less cards in the deck, the more consistent it is, the more powerful it is, and they have opted to give you an option to play less than 50. It's 45 now at the cost of 3 health. You are taking 10% of your life, but you are also reducing your deck size by 10%. So you will be that much more consistent, right? I did not go through calculations right now for mulligans and for starting hands and like what are the odds of you opening with a ramp if you're like playing this in like a green villain, for instance, like 3 resupply, 3 super laser type. What's the chance you will have that in your opening hand now? How many 2-drops do you need, or turn 1 plays, I should say, do you need in a 45 card deck? Are you able? How much can you trim down on that, etc., etc.? There's a lot to kind of parse through with it, with this. It's obviously an upside, right? It's just going to be something that's very difficult to calculate if it's worth it. Something that I think you will likely need to play tons and tons of games and actually track data to understand if this is better than the 3 health, because you're not going to get it just from feel. It's marginal percentages increase in getting better cards in your hand throughout a game, right? Throughout an X amount of turns. But you're going to, let's say you win a game because you drew that last Ruthless Raider that you needed. Well, you don't know if you weren't going to draw it if you had 50 cards in the deck, right? There's no way in each individual circumstance to analyze that. So that's why this is going to take a lot of time, and it's going to take data manipulation. You're not, like I said, you're not going to get this from feel. You'll need to play against someone repeatedly with the 27 health version of the deck and the 30 health version of the deck and see what's winning more into what different matchups. Start tracking stats, right? This is a puzzle. It's clearly an upside. The devs have decided it's 3 health. 10% of your deck is worth 3. I think maybe they just went 10% and 10%. I don't know if this is better than Tarkentown. I don't know if this is better than playing with 30 health in the base and just the regular 50 deck size. I know you can definitely win games with more than 50 in the deck as well. It doesn't, if you opt to do that, that is okay. It's nothing wrong with that. I personally wouldn't. I think you should be playing the minimum required, and we'll try with 45 and see what happens with this, because this is really cool. This is a really innovative design, and I'm interested to see what happens with this. All right, next is a legendary. So this is Profundity. This is a 9-cost aggression heroism giant ship. It's a rebel vehicle capital ship. It's an 8/9 overwhelm. It says when played and when defeated, choose a player. That player discards a card from their hand. Then if they have more cards in their hand than you, they discard a card from their hand. So this is okay. I think mostly if this is going to see play, it'll likely see play as a sideboard card, maybe like a one of main deck, and with the main goal of it being played against like hard control decks and very late game decks, where essentially you will play this, they will have more cards in their hand, so this will play Pillage while it's like Pillage will be attached to this. They'll discard 2 cards, and then because it's an 8/9, they have to defeat it, and they will likely need to discard another card, maybe not 2 the next time because you've already hit 2. But yeah, so that's it, right? Like the goal here is to drain your opponent of resources. This in conjunction with other discard effects, right? Red Hero has a lot of them. They're often paired well together. Things like Force Throw, K2 SO, and then usually paired with things like Yellow, where you get Spark. You get other hand hate abilities, Senatorial Corvette, Pillage, even Force Surrender, Cripple Authority. There's a ton, right? You don't need all of them. But this one might make the cut here just because it's also a finisher, right? If they only have a small hand and you play this and you rip the rest of their hand up, and now you have a giant unit in play, that's cool. It competes a little bit with Crate Dragon because Crate Dragon is also kind of an anti-control tool, whereas Crate Dragon is going to be better in games where you are pushing tons of damage. Profundity will likely be a bit better in games where you have been getting controlled better, because Crate in those cases usually just like eats 1 removal and deals some damage, where Profundity is going to end up being like a 4-for-1 or even more sometimes, right? So yeah, it's a cool card. It is not going to be a core card in my opinion in decks. It's going to be a consideration for particular strategies and to counter particular strategies. All right, another legendary. This is Turbolaser Salvo. It's a tactic. It's a 7-cost command event, and it says choose an arena. A friendly space unit deals damage equal to its power to each enemy unit in that arena. So this is a little bit of a call out, I think, to like the Piet capital ship deck. You want to get a big ship into play, and then you can play this for 7 and basically wipe 1 arena. It's expensive. It's okay. Overwhelming Barrage is much better. This can be good. I do think this can be good, especially if you're able to get big ships into play early, right? On the 6 resource turn, you want to get something big into play, and then the next turn you would do this to wipe an arena. But because of the restrictions here where you have to be in space, right? You need the big space unit, and then you need to pick an arena. If your opponent is split between 2 arenas, that can also be a little challenging. I think this one looks maybe not quite great, just kind of okay. We'll have to see kind of what mid-range ships we get, because this is of course going to be good once you get to like 10 resources and you can stick like a giant ship, but you're winning most of the games where you stick a giant ship anyway, and that's where the tension is, right? If this is played super late, once you've got a Devastator in play, well, most things that you would play at that point would win you the game, so maybe this ends up being a little win more in those cases. So we want to keep track of like the 6-7 resource ships if we get some good ones, especially with Piet, where we can curve into this in that mid game and then use it as a board wipe. And the last card I'm going to cover here is Ahsoka Tano. So we've got another unit, Ahsoka. This one's crazy though. This is a 4-cost cunning heroism unit, just like the 3-cost Ahsoka. This is a 3/5 with fringe and force traits. Force, incredibly relevant. It says when played, an opponent discards a card from their hand. If it's a unit, you may exhaust a unit. This is wow. This really helps these hero red yellow discard based strategies a ton. This right now would probably go into something like a Quinlan shell, but I am not ruling this out from being in a lot of different yellow decks. Discard just becomes so much better as you do more of it, right? Like once you get their hand small and you're able to get the whole hand, that's when discard really shines. We're already able to kind of do that in a lot of matchups, especially post board into like control decks where you get to add things like Pillage and Senatorial Corvette and whatever you want, because you've got things like Spark and you've got K2 and you've got Force Throw, which is an absolute monster of a card. And oh, did I mention this has the Force trait, so it stacks into the Force Throw. And Force Throw is an absolute beast when your opponent's hand is small, because bam, they usually have big cards left in their hand. That's usually the last thing they want to play, and you get it. You can nuke something huge often by doing that. Yellow also lets you get to peek at their hands with things like Spark and Kira, so you can maneuver the hand the way you need to. And Ahsoka being a when played, just immediately hitting a card from their hand, it is giving you 2-for-1 value basically from the start. The stats are not incredibly impressive, but we've already seen 3-5 be sufficient at 4 cost with cards like Kira that are just durable units and create an effect that messes with their opponent. And this can even, if their opponent doesn't have any events in their hand, or the event is like the card they absolutely have to play and can't discard, you're even getting an exhaust off of this. There's a lot of decks that don't play tons of events, or the events they have are super key. So that's even a little bit more upside on Ahsoka. I think this card is crazy good. I'm really looking forward to like messing with this and more Force stuff. I'm hoping we get some more Force based synergy cards. Obviously, I don't think we will get anything on the power level of Force Throw, but it would be nice to get some Force traded event in yellow. It's something we don't have yet, because yellow happens to be one of the most synergistic colors with the Force trait right now, where you have a lot of Force units and they all actually work incredible, and like the strategy works incredibly well with Force Throw specifically. So it'd be nice to get another yellow one to really push that strategy. But Ahsoka's great. It's not a legendary this time, although certainly I think it could have been. But yeah, we're probably going to see this card. All right, I am going to hop over now to SLUDB and we will check out the rest of the spoilers. All right, so let's take a look at the rest of these spoilers. The first one where we left off will be Snap Wexley. So this is a 3-cost Command Heroism pilot unit. On its unit side, it's a 2/5 that says when played as a unit or on attack, the next resistance card you play this phase costs 1 less. And then piloting, it's a 2-cost pilot, gives +2/+2, and it says when played as an upgrade, search the top 5 cards of your deck for a resistance card, reveal it, and draw it. I like this as an upgrade. +2/+2 is kind of our baseline stats for 2 cost, but this is also drawing a card, so it kind of replaces itself. Of course, it's only drawing a card when you have a resistance deck, but that's going to be the point of this. The backup plan of this being a unit, it's okay as a 2/5. It does have a when played, although that's going to be only relevant like much later in the game, where you like play this into something else to get that discount. But mostly I think it's going to be a turn 2 play that you will then attack with, and then you can play the next resistance card from 1 less. And interestingly enough, that could be something like Poe, right? You could play this on turn 2, attack with it, and then play a Poe on turn 3. That's pretty powerful. I haven't seen a ton of resistance cards yet, but this one is pretty solid. I think it's not going to be playable at all unless your deck is mostly resistance cards. But if it is, this looks like it could be a pretty core piece of the puzzle. And next, another resistance card we got is BB-8. This is a 1-cost aggression heroism unit. It's a 1/4 vanilla. No effect if you play it as a unit. If you play it as an upgrade, it also costs 1 and it gives +1/+2 baseline. And then it says you can pay 2 when you play it as an upgrade if you do ready a resistance unit. And that's pretty powerful. So for 3 cost, when you upgrade, you can give something +1/+2 and ready it. And that's powerful because we know like 3 cost to ready something. We don't have that without restrictions. We saw one in the previous preview that said ready a vehicle that costs 6 with 6 or less power. We know Keep Fighting is a unit with 3 or less power, right? These are cards that cost 3 but have restrictions, and this one's restriction exists. It's just a resistance unit, right? There's no like power threshold, and this also gives a buff And if you put this on a resistance vehicle, for instance, you would then be able to ready that vehicle, which is pretty nice. This is a powerful package of stuff going on with a very cheap card, a very cheap pilot. This card looks pretty powerful to me, of course, if there's enough resistance stuff. And we will see a pretty cool one right now, a resistance space unit. This is Tactical Heavy Bomber. It's a 5-cost aggression heroism space unit. It's a 3/5 with the resistance tag, also vehicle and transport. And it says on attack, deal indirect damage equal to this unit's power to the defending player. If a base is damaged this way, draw a card. First off, this is a 5-cost do nothing, right? We don't like those in general. It's a very slow card. 5 cost does not affect the board at all the turn you play it. The stats are actually pretty weak for a 5 cost too. Where this would shine is essentially as a combo piece. The idea here is that you buff this, probably with a pilot leader, make this enormous and then attack with it just one time, and you might just blow out your opponent. If you give this +3/+4 or something as a pilot, and then bam, you deal 6 to base, you deal 6 indirect damage. If any of that damage goes into their base, you will then also draw a card, and we're off to the races. That's pretty cool. It's incredibly slow without some sort of setup. It's hard to just play 5 and then go. But the following turn, if you do ready this up, you can get an attack off with this, and then maybe even ready it up again with like the BB-8 or the Colgron tactic, the one that readies a vehicle, then we're cool. Where I will try this, because I think if this is going to see play, ideally, like I said, as a combo piece, is with the Han leader, the new one that readies resources when he flips. Because if you have this in play and just one other odd card in play, when you can flip the Han, you can play this, flip the Han pilot onto this, ready 3 resources, and then bam, now you can play either BB-8 or that Colgron event to ready this and immediately attack with it. And that could be pretty cool, right? So you can try it there, you can try it more just normal, just like play it and hope you can ready up and get going with this. Maybe you ready up and then just immediately pilot onto this, making it difficult to remove that turn. There's not a ton of things that will destroy like a 6/9 space unit. So in that case, this does have a lot of upside, but the downside exists as well, because it's a card that doesn't do anything when you play it for 5. All right, next is a cool little 2-drop. It's Desperate Commando. It's a 2-cost vigilance unit. It's a 2/2 resistance trooper. It says when defeated, you may give a unit -1/-1 for this phase. Nice and clean. This will trade with most other turn 1 plays because they usually have 3 health. In Thrawn, for instance, this could double trigger, and then you can even trade up. It's not an aggressive card. It's purely defensive. The point here would be to use this to trade into other units. Blue wants that, because blue doesn't tend to be particularly aggressive and doesn't have particularly good early plays. And this, I think, is actually better than a lot of the early plays that blue gets, especially on the hero side. Actually on both sides, to be honest. So it's got okay traits as well, although I'm not sure the resistance tag is something that we're going to be building around in blue. But overall, it's a cool little 2-drop. And next we've got Raddis. This is a big ship. It's a 7-cost command heroism unit. It's an 8/6 resistance vehicle capital ship. It says while you control another resistance card, unit, upgrade, or leader, this gets Sentinel. That's going to be incredibly important. If this doesn't have Sentinel when you play it, boy, is it not good. But if that's consistent, it'll be good. And then we also have when defeated, deal damage equal to this unit's power to an enemy unit. And that goes hand in hand with this Sentinel stuff, because now all of a sudden they have to kill this, and then this is going to deal 8 to something else. And that's pretty powerful. At 7 cost, I think it's kind of reasonable as long as this always has Sentinel. Like, I would not want to get into a situation where this doesn't have Sentinel, but when it does, this is going to be a pretty solid brick wall. And next we've got Black Squadron Scout Wing. It's a 4/6 space unit in Cunning Heroism. It's a resistance vehicle fighter. And it says when you play an upgrade on this unit, you may attack with this unit. It gets +1/+0 for this attack. Lets you action cheat a little bit. But this is also a 5-cost do nothing. And it's even less exciting than the bomber that we saw. This one, this looks like mostly a draft card. And this is the Cargo Frigate. It's a 5-cost Vigilance Heroism space unit. It's a 6/7 resistance vehicle capital ship, and it says this unit gets -1/-0 for each damage on it. Those are giant stats for a 5-cost. We're like pushing into the zone of like how many stats is good enough for a 5-cost do nothing. And is this one there? Maybe. It does shrink pretty wildly, so if like you use it to immediately trade into something, it's gonna get kind of tiny. But if you have healing, especially like maybe the Obi-Wan leader, for instance, can like keep this going, keep this from losing all its power. That's pretty cool. So this one looks fringe to me. Just like the stats alone are really beefy, so like we don't see 6/7 for 5, right? And this is even in space, so that's pretty cool. All right, next is Mist Hunter. This is a 3-cost cunning villainy space unit. It's a 3/4, so that stat line in space no longer super premium. Got a lot of those. It's an underworld vehicle transport, so underworld is relevant. That helps with things like McClunky. It helps with the Cad Bane deck. Cad Bane was definitely looking for some more space units. It says on attack, if you played a bounty hunter or pilot card this phase, you may draw a card. So that's very slow, right? Because you have to play this, you have to ready up. You can't attack with it first action. You need to first play the bounty hunter or pilot, and then you can attack with this. But, you know, this is, at least like in a Cad Bane deck, this is better than Punishing One, because frankly, the Punishing One ability was also not useful, and that deck would play like bounty hunters like Forlom and Zuckuss, so there's a chance this will get you a card draw. I don't think the ability is great, but the stats are fine. The trade is good, so it could see a decent, like some amount of play just on that alone, even without that text mattering too much. All right, we covered some of those. All right, here's a really cool one. This is General Hux. So we talked about Phasma earlier, like a first order aggro deck. Well, General Hux will be a big part of that if it takes off. It's a 2-cost aggression villainy unit. It's a 1/4 first order official. So of course, 1/4 in aggro, not a great stat line, but each other friendly first order unit gains raid 1. Now we understand why this has 4 health, because that's like the red 3 buff, except this guy is cheaper and has more health, so he's a little more durable. So if you're able to go wide with General Hux, that's a lot of potential damage. He also has an action to exhaust. If you played a first order card this phase, draw a card. That's really nice too. That's like Dr. Pershing-esque as well. So there's like 2 really good effects on this guy. And I like it. Yeah, I actually like that he has 4 health, like that he's a 1/4, because both of these effects reward you for having this guy stick around. And he's not the biggest threat to your opponent's life pool, which might mean they have to focus on other units, especially if they have to like take 2 attacks to get through Hux because of that 4 health. So this is a pretty solid looking card to me. And here we've got another first order unit. This one, not as exciting. It's Special Forces TIE Fighter, 2-cost aggression villainy, 2/3 first order vehicle fighter. Says when played, if an opponent controls more space units than you, ready this unit. This effect isn't very good because, first of all, they would have to have 2 more than you, because this is a space unit. So if they only have like 1 unit in space and you have none, you play this, it won't ready. And then of course 2/3 space unit for 2 is not an exciting stat line at all, especially not for an aggressive deck. We really want 3 power on our units. So this one, less exciting, but because of the first order synergy, especially like Captain Phasma, even Hux might be able to buff this. It could be nice. I don't expect a deck like this to have this effect trigger too often, because you are probably going to be the one playing a bunch of units. But in those cases where you can play this ready, it does get a nice buff. But this one looks more like filler to me. I hope this isn't like a premium piece of this deck, because it is not great. This one, on the other hand, is pretty solid. This is a 1-cost unit. It's a command villainy space unit, first order TIE Fighter. It's a 2/1 with the first order vehicle fighter tags. So already it's just like the TIE LN from set 1, but this also has text that says while you control a token unit, this unit gains raid 1. So far we haven't seen first order be super token heavy, but I expect there's going to be something soon that maybe we see with token generating in First Order or otherwise somewhere else, because in that case, this could be quite powerful, right? Because then it's a 1 cost that can attack as a 3/1, and if you can start with a couple of these and then like play a token, you're going to be pushing a lot of damage. But it's already pure power creep on the Tile N. I mean, it's not technically power creep because this Tile N can be played in non-green decks, and this is for green. But essentially, it is better than that. It does lose the Imperial trait, so it's not as good in like a Tarkin deck. But the First Order trait, we get the buffs from that. So Hux, we get Phasma, and we are definitely going to keep tabs on what other Force Order synergies we can find. And here's another First Order card. This is Captain Phasma unit version. This is a 5-cost command villainy unit. It's a 5/6 First Order trooper. It says when played and on attack, you may give another First Order unit +2/+2 for this phase. So the stats are good. Now we don't, like I said, we don't usually love just like chunky do nothings, but this does something, right? This has a when played. It gives something +2/+2 when you play it, which is already solid, right? Especially in a deck that's going to be trying to play to the board with a lot of units. This comes out the same turn as the Captain Phasma leader, so you could, for instance, flip your leader, play this to buff the leader. Now you've also played a First Order unit, so the leader ability will trigger. So that curves pretty nicely. Additionally, this is green. ECL. This is actually a pretty solid ECL unit. It's gonna trigger twice when you do it, so you can give something +4/+4 for the turn. That's a lot of potential damage that you'll push. So I like this. I think this is quite a solid card. I think this works well in what like the First Order thing is trying to do, especially because of the Captain Phasma leader, where they happen on the same turn, and that's pretty powerful. So this is quite a solid little beater. All right, next up, we've got Frisk. This is a 2-cost aggression heroism unit, and this is a 3/2 vanilla. So if you just play it as a unit, 2 cost 3/2, that's fine. Piloting is a 2-cost upgrade +2/+2, and it says when played as an upgrade, you may defeat an upgrade that costs 2 or less. That's pretty cool, right? That can pop shields, pop experience. It can pop other pilots. Very important, I think, is that part of it. And yeah, like solid, right? There's a lot of these pilots. They're all like in this same area of like power level. They just all have different utility. We can't obviously play all of them, but I like that a lot of them have like different ways that they can interact with your opponent or help buff your own team. So because of that, I think these strategies will have enough choices to hopefully do something powerful, right? Because we're getting a decent critical mass of like effective costed upgrades, right? But your deck can't be all upgrades, but this one especially looks a bit like a utility card to me. It's nice that it's like built-in upgrade hate on basically a unit that you could just play as a 2-cost 3/2, which is, you know, it's a fine backup plan. It's not the end of the world. All right, next up is Fight Fire with Fire. It's a 1-cost aggression event. It says choose a friendly unit and an enemy unit in the same arena. If you do, deal 3 damage to each of them. So this is cool. I think likely you need units that don't care about taking damage, maybe a bunch of grit units in your deck. There's like a bunch of 1/4 grit units and villainy vigilance, right? Maybe this is something that you want to build around with an Asajj deck, because Asajj is also a little bit about self-hurting your units. It's a little bit like McClunky, right? It's like that turn 1 removal, but like you have to do something bad to one of your own units, like bounce them. In this case, deal 3 to them. This is an interesting card to have around. I think McClunky is a much safer card than this is, but also has much more of a restriction than this does. And 1 cost to deal 3 to a unit is solid, right? Like that's a good rate. So we'll see if this can be powerful enough. I think likely it will need to be built in conjunction with units that you are okay with self-harm. And the last card for today is Moff Gideon. This is a 4-cost cunning villainy unit. He's a 5/4 Imperial official. It says when this unit deals combat damage to an opponent's base, each unit that opponent plays this phase costs 1 more. So the issue here is 4 health, naturally, on a 4 cost. those don't typically tend to get that much play because, you know, they die real fast. And probably the most popular one that gets played is K2SO, but he has an effect that is good when he dies, so that's solid, right? This 5/4, it's a beefy stat line. If you are able to like ready up, swing for 5 into your opponent, and then tax their whole turn, that's powerful, right? So this is kind of a remove on sight sort of card, but you know, most 5 power 4 drops would be, but they don't really see any play. There honestly aren't very many of them, so it's hard to evaluate in that context. He has like Saw Gerrera stats, who's notably not been particularly good even when being played in mono red. Like, he's often not played in a deck like that because the 4 health has just been too much of a liability. So I don't foresee this being great, but having an option for a 5 power 4 cost unit is something. It actually kind of exists in Cunning Villainy. The Rush Clovis is a 3/5 that has Raid 2, so it's actually a sturdier unit that can also attack for 5. Obviously, I don't think his effect is nearly as potent as this one, but he doesn't see any play, so we'll see. I don't think Moff is going to be amazing, but it's a cool looking card, so who knows. Anyway, that's it. That's the end of this review. Let me know what you think of these cards. Interested to hear your takes, and keep eyes out for over the next couple of days. I'll be previewing your card myself. Catch you soon. Take care.